Hello, so here's my presentation for the market and community garden at Ruchill Golf Course. So, like the broader brush design for the whole site, the assumption here is that the soil has been signed off as being suitable for food production. So, at the time of presenting this, we don't know if the soil is suitable or not. We have found some contamination that needs to get sampled, possibly replaced. We're not sure yet. But that's the assumption that it is safe to go in terms of all the ideas here. So that's the total design for the whole site. The area in yellow in the top left, so anything that's yellow is the community use. So that's more like allotments, community growing, regular drop-in sessions from local people coming in and helping with the community side of stuff. The rest of the site is more for the market garden, commercial growing. So you'll have volunteers in there as well, but the focus is really on food production rather than community engagement. So the yellow outline there is the perimeter of the site. And then we've got 3 access points here. So that's the perimeter fence going up and the short rotational coppice around the outside, and there's 3 entrances. The bottom left goes into the rest of the golf course site. So that's mostly going to be pedestrians coming into the community areas, walking in either via the pavilion or via the main gate on Brassey Street. And they'll walk through the golf course and come in that way. The main vehicle access, the bigger gate on the right there, comes off Colgrain Avenue, so that needs to be a new entrance that's made. And that's for developing the site, having lorries coming in, delivering bits of buildings and gravel and making the track and larger bits of machinery. And then the smaller gate above that's a pedestrian gate, which will give access to the rest of the site, particularly to the west. So you may be doing more willow growing over there or managing the existing willow. So here's Colgrain Avenue, and the red line indicates approximately where I suggest the gate goes. So it'd be a higher fence, 2-meter fence all the way around there as well. Some large vehicle gates, and you'd need to grade in the slope. It's a little bit steep at the moment, so that needs grading to make it a gentler slope to gain access to the site. So that perimeter is a deer fence, about 1.8 metres high, 2 metres high, something like that. And you may as well also put rabbit proofing in. I haven't seen that much evidence of rabbits, but it's definitely a site rabbits could live on. And you really want to keep these animals out of the whole site. Just inside that, there's a large band of green going around the outside. So that's the thinner areas are 7 meters thick from the fence in the way, and that's primarily willow, hybrid willow, which is very fast growing. And the main purpose for that is to provide fertility for the site. So it's been designed that about a quarter of the site each year of that willow, a quarter of the willow will get cut every year and coppiced, and it will regrow. And that will provide you with a lot of material to process down into ramial wood chip. And ramial wood chip, small diameter wood chip with a higher nitrogen content, which is perfect for hot composting and producing lots of compost for the rest of your growing. So here's an example of hybrid willow on a short rotational coppice. It looks something like that. So once you're cutting and harvesting that willow, this will probably be done in February or March. You'll need a way of moving all that material up to your growing area, and a cart like this one's made by Stein. It's designed for moving branches around. It can be towed by a person, or you can get an attachment where you can hook it onto the back of a small vehicle, and you can get a lot of material on there. So to go along with that trailer, the branch moving cart, I suggest some sort of small vehicle like a quad bike, or this is an all-terrain vehicle with a cab and a small pickup on the back, made by Polaris, and you get an electric version of this. So that would be your rig for moving the willow branches up to the main growing area. You then need to chip the branches down to small pieces. So a small commercial chipper or shredder like this would be great. You can get electric versions. This one in the picture is petrol. And the product you're making from all that willow is the ramial wood chip, which looks a bit like this. I'll explain what you're going to do with the ramial wood chip in a minute. But that's the purpose of that perimeter, basically. It's keeping animals out with the fencing. It's providing a huge amount of fertility for the site as well. It's also providing wind shelter and biodiversity and places for animals to live. Willows are extremely good for biodiversity. So it's a great system, I think, for you guys. Just inside that willow hedge, if you like, or willow perimeter, there's an area that's slightly darker coloured green, which is just access. So it's not gravelled or tarmacked or anything. It's just, you may need occasional mowing or scything or something, or just driving over. But with your quad bike, you can get access all the way round the outside, the perimeter of the site, and that would be great just for getting materials around, delivering trees, taking compost around, collecting the willow when you're cutting it. So the backbone of the design really is this track. It's about 4 meters wide, so perfect for driving vehicles along, even bigger vehicles. There's a large yard in the centre there, sort of roughly square shape. That's the central place for the market garden, and that smaller yard on the left is for the community growing. So a little bit of parking for them and a bit of yard space for them. It's important to think ahead when you're putting the track in and planning all your services, or install all the services whilst you're doing the track. So I'm suggesting you do get hooked up to mains water. Water is essential for you. You'll be doing a lot of rainwater collection, but having the option of topping up with mains water, and also for drinking water for people on site, I think it's probably worth the cost of putting the mains water in. Traditionally, you would put the services like water and electricity next to the track or under the track, so you know where it is. So it's important to plan that in before you install the track, really. And then just to the north of that yard, the big yard, I'm going to focus on the market garden now. There's a real hub area which is for the staff running the site. I've just got a zoom in slide. You can see what's going on in that area there. The building along the bottom, the longer brown building adjacent to the yard, is a packing shed and a tool store. And that's one of the workhorse buildings. You'll be using that all the time. So storing vegetables, there'll be a big walk-in fridge in there as well. But it's a place of work, basically. Getting vegetables prepped, stored, put into veg boxes and out the door. To the left of that, there's 3 black cylinders, and each of those is a 15,000 litre water tank, and they'll be collecting all the rainwater off the roofs there. The smaller brown building is a staff room and an office. So I think it's important people can just step away from the main activities, step away from any visitors, get a cup of tea, get a break, but also somewhere people can do a little bit of office work when they need to. And then the small brown building just above that there is a compost toilet. The polytunnel here I've shown is a Keda greenhouse. So most of the other polytunnels would be standard polytunnels. This one's a Keda greenhouse, which is extra tough, and it's got an insulated cover on it as well. There's a photo of a Keda greenhouse. And in there, I'm suggesting you bring all your ramial wood chip and you do hot composting inside the Keda greenhouse in boxes a bit like this. By composting in the boxes and inside the polytunnel, the composting will happen a lot quicker. It'll produce more heat, and you can use that heat to start your seedlings off, like in this example. But you can also top the rotting compost off with finished compost and grow early crops in there as well. So basically, the ramial wood chip goes into the bays, into the boxes. You're using the heat as it's composting, and then the end result, you get finished compost at the end of the year. That finished compost can go into the bigger polytunnels to top dress to in a no-dig gardening style. This is Charles Dowding, a UK no-dig grower. So that's inside. You can also use it outside on the veg beds as well. So the rainwater system, this is extremely simplified, but going in, you have rainwater from the gutters, and then you also have the option of topping the tank up from the mains water if you have to. I would do that as a last resort because it costs about £30 to fill up each tank from the mains, because you'll be metered. So if you can just use rainwater for watering, you'd be saving about £11,000 a year over using the rain. The mains would cost about £11,000. Rainwater would be free essentially. And then you have one single set of pipes going out from these tanks going off to the veg beds and the tunnels. So once you've got that infrastructure in, the next stage is to build 1, 2 or 3 commercial sized polytunnels. So the polytunnels are going to be hugely productive, a lot more productive than the outdoor growing, different crops as well as growing earlier and later in the year. So I think that's invaluable, having that indoor growing space for this project. So they're 10 meters wide by 20 meters long, a really nice big indoor growing space. And I'd go for separate tunnels with a 2 meter gap in between rather than a multi-span tunnel. It just seemed a bit tougher and a bit stronger. If you do get a lot of snow, which you can do, it's more likely to fall off rather than sit on top of a multi-span tunnel. So yes, that would be the next thing to get going. Once you've got some polytunnel space, you could start focusing on the outdoor growing. So I would suggest laying that out with permanent tracks, as I've got there, going left to right, wide enough to get your quad bike or your Polaris vehicle and the trailer down. And then you can start setting up the veg beds off those. And the veg beds, I think, should run north to south. And they're spaced at 75 centimetres for the bed and 25 centimetres for the path, all on no dig. And there we go, they're in 3 blocks. I would start with the top block, running left to right closest to the polytunnels, 1 year, 2nd year the next block down, 3rd year the next block down below that. So the whole site is kind of phased over a number of years basically. Probably take about 5 years before everything's up and running. Once all this is established, the farm's up and running, you're growing vegetables, you're selling vegetables. If you feel like you still need more indoor growing space, I have left some room for that. And I've also linked into those extra polytunnels is some ponds. So those 2 ponds at the top, the circular ones, they're primarily for extra storage of water in an emergency. They will have great wildlife value as well, but what you're doing there is catching the water off the polytunnels through drainage channels and channeling that into those top ponds. There's the extra polytunnels if you need them. And then in between there, those lines is representing drainage. And you're storing that water in those ponds as high up on the site as you can. The lower pond at the bottom there is almost exclusively for wildlife. So those dark areas I've just put in, that's just representing your shadier parts of the site. So when you're coming on to planting in between all the vegetable growing with more perennial plants, just be aware of the shade there. So there's still areas left open at the moment. I've labelled them A, B, C, D, and in there you can put fruit trees, you can grow soft fruit, you can grow comfrey, which is a great fertility plant for you, as well as the willow, an extra source of fertility. And in some of the areas, maybe closer to the centre, you could do forest gardening as well. So that's an example of an apple tree with comfrey growing underneath. That would be great to fill in those areas. That's a much more intensive way of growing, which is forest gardening. That's Martin Crawford in that photo. And you could have hundreds of different plants in a forest garden, all being productive one way or another. You could simplify that to 10 or 20 different species, but forest gardening would be great to have that as a demonstration. It could really help with a business having that demonstration to then sell the plants for forest gardening from the farm as well. And there's also lots of soft fruit you can grow, like raspberries, strawberries, gooseberries, blackcurrants, etc. And this is honeyberries, which is a fairly new one to Scotland from Japan. A lot of people are excited about growing honeyberries in Scotland. So that's the design and the layout for the market garden. I'll just talk you through the community growing area. So if it's coloured yellow on this map, then it's a community growing space. So there you've got a community growing polytunnel, you've got a compost toilet and a building which should have a kitchen in it, an open area for teaching and your tools. And then in the left back corner, I'm suggesting that's a great space for allotments, so community groups or neighbours could take on a plot. And that circular area is an event space. So that's me talk you through the whole design for the market garden and the community growing.